These are the new Mega Evolutions that I think will dominate in Pokémon Champions. Now, in the first part of this video, I wanted to go over some new Megas that, have revealed abilities, so it's a little bit less speculative, and we kind of know what they're going to be doing. And then in the second part, I wanted to go over some of the Megas that we don't know the abilities of, and talk about, if they get a good ability, these might be very, very strong. So first up, I have Mega Delphox. And I know as soon as it got Levitate, a lot of people sort of wrote it off. But even though this loses access to being able to just like spam Expanding Force in Psychic Train, I think it's still actually a pretty good ability for it. Obviously, having the ground immunity is not going to be necessarily a bad thing for a fire type Pokemon. And I think especially since Garchomp is most likely going to be very, very strong in Pokemon Champions, this is definitely a good ability to have. And it also means that you can, sit it next to Garchomp and just spam Earthquake and potentially like Heat Wave or Psychic. On here I have Flamethrower as the third attack. There's a lot of different things you can run. You could run Shadow Ball for coverage into other Mega Delphoxes. There's quite a few things actually that get hit by Shadow Ball pretty hard, so that's an option. You could also run something like Overheat for like a stronger nuke. I just have Flamethrower here. It's kind of a neutral option. I think the main question with Mega Delphox is going to be, is it better than Mega Charizard Y to be sitting it next to Garchomp and just spamming Earthquake next to? I think Mega Charizard Y wins in a lot of areas. Just like the ability, being able to set the sun is really, really strong just for supporting other Pokemon on the team. But Mega Delphox does have some things going for it, mainly in its speed. A base 134 is extremely fast. Most likely we're not going to have the Paradox Pokemon, especially on launch. So something like Fluttermane at base 135. And then also probably won't have the Ruinous Legendary. So something like Fluttermane, Chenpao, we won't have to worry about those. So base 134 is extremely, extremely fast. Probably going to be faster than pretty much everything else that will be relevant in the format, other than something maybe like if Mega Garchomp Z or Mega Lucario Z is good, then obviously those things are at base 151. Those will be a bit faster. Oh yeah, and then you also have a Dragapult, I guess, at 142. But base 134 is extremely, extremely fast. The big thing is, I know there's a lot of things sitting at around 120, like Sneasler, so you can outspeed those pretty comfortably. I don't even think you need to be like max speed timid, unless you are running something like the Shadow Ball and you want to outspeed other Mega Delphox. But yeah, I think this Pokemon will actually be very, very strong. I'm not sure how strong. I know a few videos ago I made a tier list ranking all the returning Megas, and I also decided to rank the Kalos Megas because we already had the abilities for them at that point. And I think I ranked Mega Delphox a little bit too low. After thinking about it a bit more, I think this Pokemon genuinely has a lot of potential to do very well. So I'd probably bump it up at least a tier if you've seen that video. But yeah, I think it could do quite well with something like this Life Orb Garchomp, just spamming Earthquake next to it. You just spam Heat Wave Earthquake, and you can kind of deal with everything. I have a Life Orb here. You can just run like Clear Amulet or something as well if you want to. Now, moving on, this is a Pokemon that I talked about in my most recent video, where I went over some strong cores for the start of Pokemon Champions. And I think Mega Frostlass is going to be very, very good. Just having the ability to click a very, very strong Blizzard and set the snow at the same time, I think is very, very good. If you think about like the other Pokemon that can set snow and click Blizzard, we're thinking about Pokemon like Ninetales, and those blizzards are very, very weak. Whereas you look at something like Frostlass, it has base 140 special attack. It's actually going to be hitting very, very hard. So, I think this is definitely going to be like a relatively oppressive Pokemon. There are a lot of Pokemon that are like 4 times weak to ice even, like Dragonite and potentially Mega Salamence, that are really not going to like seeing this Pokemon. The other thing is this third move here. I have Aurora Veil. I know a lot of people are commenting on my last video saying, oh, well, you can run Aurora Veil on Mega Frostlass. I do think that Aurora Veil is good, but something that you're going to see a decent amount, I think, is Wide Guard, because there are a lot of strong spread moves, and having an Ice type move to get around that, so something like the Ice Beam, I think might be very valuable. There's going to be a lot of Pelipper's running Wide Guard. You might see a little bit of Mega Aerodactyl running Wide Guard as well. I'm not too sure. Yeah, definitely I would look out for those Wide Guard Pokemon. Especially something like the Pelipper plus the Dragonite. You really want to be able to hit the Dragonite with that strong Ice type move. So yeah, something like an Ice Beam might be good. And if you're running Frostlass on one of these like fast, Tailwind HO teams, I don't think Aurora Veil is really necessary. Another idea I had for a composition like this is running something like the Power Sturdy Archaludon. I think that could be really, really strong. It helps to cover for a few things that Frostlass can't. And just I think Power Sturdy Archaludon is going to be very good with Whimsicott in general. This is a fake Tears Whimsicott, so I think you would have a lot of options with the Archaludon on this team, and so I think that's definitely something to consider. But something like the Archaludon with the Sturdy is not really going to be benefiting too much from the Auroraville, and I think it's hard to attack on Pokemon that actually do benefit from it. So definitely like I would consider potentially running Ice Beam over the Veil. I don't think Veil is bad by any means. I think Veil is still a very, very strong option. Especially if we have something like Ursaluna Blood Moon in the game. I think tacking on like an Ursaluna Blood Moon onto a composition like this would definitely make running Aurora Veil worth it. But if something like that isn't in the game and we don't necessarily have those options, I do think that the Ice Beam might be a little bit stronger. Now, next up, we have Mega Meganium. And this Pokemon, I think, was very, very overhyped on Twitter when its ability got revealed. I think this Pokemon is, like, good, but it's not that good, in my opinion. And a lot of it is going to come down to how exactly its ability functions. So I think pairing it with something like the Pelipper here for the rain will benefit it a lot if its ability functions the way that most of us think it's going to function. And that's that basically the entire attack, it acts as if the sun is up. And in that case, the Weather Ball from the Mega Meganium would act as if it's a 100 base power fire type move being boosted by the sun, that 50% boost. Now, if it makes it so that the Weather Ball is a fire type move, but then it gets halved because of the rain, well, that's a problem for it, right? And I don't think that's how it's going to work, but there's potentially a chance that is how it works, and in that case I really don't think that it's going to be as good. I believe this does also get access to something like the Dazzling Gleam, so if you do want to run like a fairy type attack on this, I think that's also an option. I just thought the recovery here was quite a good tool to have, so yeah, I think Dazzling Gleam is also possibly an option. I don't think it's going to be tough to find good fairy type Pokemon. Maybe have something like the Mega Gardevoir, but there's really not a lot of options. So, definitely maybe it could fill a bit of a niche in that way, where it at least gets like a pretty strong spread fairy type attack. But I don't know, this Pokemon, I think it'll be decent. It's going to see some play, maybe not as much as people initially thought when they saw the ability. I think the speed is a little bit slow. There might be quite a bit of Venusaur and just will get removed by a Sludge Bomb from the Venusaur. There's a lot of things that potentially threaten it that it's not really going to like to see. If anything, if it's favorable for it to not run Dazzling Gleam, this fairy type on it is almost hurting it. It's just adding more weaknesses for it. So, maybe giving it a fairy type was actually a negative change. I'm not sure. But we'll see how this plays out, because I think this Pokemon could be really interesting. It's definitely one of those ones that's very hard to predict, because we haven't really had an ability like this in the game before, and we really don't know how that Weather Ball interaction is going to play out. So finally, as far as Pokemon with abilities that we know that I wanted to talk about, Mega Dragonite I think will be pretty strong. I saw Eric Rios, I think, was posting on Twitter. He got number 1 on the pre-champions, showdown ladder with a Mega Dragonite Rain team, and it seemed pretty interesting. This Pokemon is really just kind of a big stat monster, and being able to, the special attacker is also pretty useful for it. You don't have to worry as much about Intimidate. Obviously, the base Dragonite does have the option to run Inner Focus, so that wasn't a super big issue for it, but the only thing is that it is wasting some stat points here. Obviously it has 124 base attack here still, and so I guess it could have had more stats, but I think it has enough of them probably. Now you could definitely run a bit more speed than this. I think bulky and offensive is pretty good, but yeah, you could definitely take out some of the HP or special attack here and run something a little bit faster. But, multi-scale is going to let it set things up pretty easily. And I think if you want to run Tailwind on it, you then have the option to forgo Tailwind on the Pelipper and just run Wide Guard and Protect. Like I was mentioning earlier, Wide Guard is going to be pretty useful for stopping things like Blizzard from that Mega Frostlass, especially if that becomes super popular, which I do think Mega Frostlass will be good. Obviously, assuming we don't have those weird, Mega Evolution happens before Switch type of thing that we were seeing initially. We're still not really sure how that's going to all play out, but it doesn't necessarily seem like that's going to be the case to me. And I still don't think that would completely ruin Mega Frostlass, but it would probably make it a little bit worse. But either way, I think Mega Frostlass is going to be very strong, so having a way to stop those blizzards from connecting with the Mega Dragonite is going to be pretty big. And the other thing is that I would imagine with the multi-scale, because this Pokemon is so bulky, you can probably, even if you do get hit by one of those blizzards, you probably can take the first one. It would be something that I would have to calc, but you probably can't take the first one. You'd probably be taken down very low, but, in worst case scenario, the multi-scale does help it a little bit in that sense. And yeah, you could probably get a very reliable Tailwind up with this Pokemon, and then very strong Draco Meteors and accurate Hurricanes in the rain. I think this Pokemon will be pretty solid. The only thing is that it doesn't really offer anything outside of something like that Tailwind, but its ability doesn't offer anything super strong support-wise, like a lot of the Weather Megas do, because the weather is used to help support the rest of the team. So you could argue that it has a little bit less viability because of that, but I think this Pokemon will still be pretty solid. Now, to start off with the more speculative stuff, I wanted to talk about Mega Meowstic, and this one's a little bit scary. So in this sort of pre-Champions showdown ladder that people have been playing, the ability that has been assigned to Mega Meowstic is Psychic Surge. And I know there's been a lot of speculation about this as well, about the potential that it could get Psychic Surge. Design-wise, it would make a lot of sense for this Pokemon to get Psychic Surge, but it would be very, very scary. This Pokemon presumably gets access to Expanding Force. Obviously, we don't know that for sure, but presumably it gets access to Expanding Force. And if it's able to set the Psychic Train and just be able to start clicking Expanding Force, obviously there's some pretty glaring strengths with that, especially with the stat spread here. Base 124 is extremely, extremely fast, so this will be outspeeding Sneasler when it doesn't have the Unburden proc, and also be outspeeding Mega Frostlass, so that's a pretty big thing. It also has some pretty strong coverage moves. I know a lot of people have been running Earth Power, which I think is really, really interesting for it. Just be able to hit a lot of those, fire types, especially something like the Incineroar. And that also gives it more options into something like the T-Tar Excadrill stuff. So yeah, the Earth Power is definitely a very, very strong option for it. Also Shadow Ball here. I think Shadow Ball is good just for opposing Mega Meowstic. I was mentioning earlier that Mega Delphox could be good. There's a lot that you can hit with Shadow Ball, but you could also replace Shadow Ball for something like the Psychic, just for a single target option for those wide guards. I do think Earth Power is kind of the superior coverage move here. I would probably remove Shadow Ball before I remove Earth Power, but yeah, no, this Pokemon is going to be absolutely ridiculous if it does get Psychic Surge, especially with something like this Psychic Seed Sneasler. And we saw this happening a lot in Regulation H, where the Psychic Seed Sneasler would be paired with the Indeedee Male with Psychic Surge. But Mega Meowstic is considerably better than Indeedee Male. It's a little bit more bulky. Now, I'm not saying it's super bulky or anything. It's still quite frail, but it has a little bit more bulk than Indeedee Male. So it can maybe take an extra hit or something. And it's way faster, way stronger. There's a lot to be concerned about here potentially with this Pokemon's viability. Now, once again, we don't know for sure that this is going to get Psychic Surge. It looks like it could get Psychic Surge. We don't know that for sure. If it gets Psychic Surge, it'll be really good. I think if it gets pretty much any other ability, it's going to probably end up being not that good. It might be pretty bad, honestly, but if it gets Psychic Surge, I think it'll be one of the best megas in the game. Probably an easy S tier mega. Now, next up I wanted to talk about Excalibur, and this Pokemon, just purely based on its stats, this is just ridiculous. And I think Sinistcha would be a good redirector for it. You don't really have too many options for redirectors so far that we're aware of, but the big issue for this Pokemon is the fact that it can be intimidated. The big thing that was being run on Excalibur without its Mega was the Clear Amulet. I know some people ran other sets. The AV was run for a very short period of time, and then there was people running Loaded Dice Scale Shot with it as well. But I think with the Mega, it can be affected by Intimidate. I think it's still going to do quite a bit of damage even at -1, just off of base 175 attack. That's pretty ridiculous. But it would rather not be Intimidate cycled by something like an Incineroar. So if it gets an ability that is able to block Intimidate, that would be ridiculous for it. I mean, something like a Clear Body or an Inner Focus would be really good for it. Especially because you can bring it in a bit later, so you don't have to worry about like the Intimidate on lead, and you bring it a bit later, Mega Evolve it. They can't Intimidate cycle you, and you can just knock everything out. I do also think something like Swords Dance on here, you could get rid of Icicle Crash, just run Swords Dance. I think priority Ice Shard at like +2 off of base 175 attack would be very, very threatening, and you could even pair this with something like the Grimmsnarl and run like a bulky like screens sort of team with this. I think that could be very, very interesting, and maybe have like a potential, you know, soft Trick Room mode with the Sinistra as well. I think that could be a really, really interesting composition that could do very, very well. Now, the last Pokemon I wanted to talk about, and I'm also pairing this one with Sinistra because I think it's probably the best Trick Room setter for it, since it's a normal type, weak to close combat. Of course, you can Rage Powder that away. I think you could, in theory, pair this with something like the Farigiraf instead, but Sinistra seems a little bit better, and that is the Mega Drampa. And people are speculating that this is going to get Drizzle. I think it would fit the design, and, you know, the other big thing is that we have a Mega Evolution confirmed for all the other 3 weathers, right? We have Sun Setter, Mega Charizard Y. We have our Sand Setter in Mega Tyranitar. And then we recently learned that, you know, Mega Frostlass is going to get Snow Warning, but we don't have a Mega Evolution for Rain, and Mega Drampa would make sense for that. The only thing is that it's not a water type, right? So it can't as easily take advantage of that rain. You know, I have Hydro Pump on it, but obviously that's a very inconsistent move to be running. And its main stabs are Normal and Dragon type, which are not terrible, but, you know, the fact that it can't really take as much advantage of its own rain is a little bit concerning for it, I think. Could be a very strong Pokemon still, though. I think it could definitely, you know, obviously it would help to support the Sinistra itself, just because that Pokemon is weak to Fire-type attacks. You could set up the rain, and then, you know, you get the half damage from Fire-type attacks into the Sinistra. The Pokemon also has a very high base special attack at 160. So those are going to be pretty strong Hyper Voices and potential Dragon Pulses. I guess you could also run Draco Meteor, but in my head, this Pokemon kind of just wants to be spamming attacks, and if you click Draco, then you're not going to be able to spam attacks as easily, just because they're going to be doing a lot less damage after that. You're going to have to switch out. But this Pokemon could be interesting. I think, you know, it definitely, I mean, a lot of the new Megas seem very underwhelming. This is one that I think could actually do well. It's just going to be really, really dependent, like, first of all, on what its move pool is, right? If it gets some other stuff that allows it to take advantage of the rain a little bit better, then that might help it out. And then the other thing is, like, how good is this going to be, like, relative to something like the Pelipper? Because Pelipper seems a little bit more splashable, and, you know, the speed stat is a little bit more manageable. 65 isn't like fast or anything, but you can make it faster with the Focus Sash. Something like this is really slow, so it kind of has to be in Trick Room to take full advantage of its offenses. And, you know, it seems like it'd be in a bit of an awkward position, but it, like, regardless, if a Pokemon's able to set the weather, I don't think it's going to be like bad. It has good enough stats. I think there are other abilities that this Pokemon could get that might actually even be better for it than Drizzle, but this is what everyone's talking about right now, so I figured I would just sort of theory it with the Drizzle. I think if you run something like this, you probably want to run something like Archaludon as well, just to be able to, you know, take more full advantage of the rain. Maybe you even run this as like a secondary rain setter on a team with the Pelipper, and that allows you to sort of have another option into something like the Sand team, where they have the Mega T-Tar and they can just like hold it off until you set the rain and then Mega Evolve and set the Sand again. Well, now you have your Mega Drampa that can come in and set the rain again for you. So, you know, that could be sort of an interesting concept. So yeah, I think this Pokemon could be good. Maybe not as good as some of the other stuff that I mentioned here, but it definitely has some strong potential. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. If you have any other ideas, I would really appreciate it if you comment down below. Thank you for watching. Bye.